Hello everyone, and welcome back to our discussion of Act 1, Scene 2 of Julius Caesar. So today's scene is still in the same scene as the video from yesterday, and we're going to further dive into the conversation that takes place between Brutus and Cassius. So when we talk about characters today, we're really focused just on these two. So Brutus, the friend of Caesar, and Cassius, this last member of the first triumvirate who is seeking to lead the conspiracy against Caesar. I know that virtue to be in you, Brutus, as well as I do know your outward favor. Well, honor is the subject of my story. I cannot tell what you and other men think of this life, but for my single self, I had as life not be as live to be in awe of such a thing as I myself. I was born free as Caesar, so were you. We both have fed as well, and we can both endure the winter's cold as well as he. For once, upon a raw and gusty day, the troubled Tiber chafing with her shores, Caesar said to me, "Darest thou, Cassius, now leap in with me into this angry flood, and swim to yonder point?" Upon the word, accoutred as I was, I plunged in and bade him follow. So indeed he did. The torrent roared, and we did buffet it with lusty sinews, throwing it aside and stemming it with hearts of controversy. But ere we could arrive the point proposed, Caesar cried, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink." I, as Aeneas, our great ancestor, did from the flames of Troy upon his shoulder the old Anchises bear, so from the waves of Tiber did I the tired Caesar. And this man is now become a god, and Cassius is a wretched creature, and must bend his body if Caesar carelessly but nod on him. He had a fever when he was in Spain, and when the fit was on him, I did mark how he did shake. 'Tis true, this god did shake. His coward lips did from their color fly, and that same eye, whose bend doth all the world, did lose his lustre. I did hear him groan. Aye, and that tongue of his that bade the Romans mark him, and write his speeches in their books, alas, it cried, "Give me some drink, Titinius," as a sick girl. Ye gods! It doth amaze me, a man of such feeble temper should so get the start of the majestic world, and bear the palm alone. Shout, flourish. Another general shout. I do believe that these applauses are for some new honors that are heaped on Caesar. Why, man, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about, to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. Brutus and Caesar? What should be in that Caesar? Why should that name be sounded more than yours? Write them together. Yours is as fair a name. Sound them. It doth become the mouth as well. Weigh them. It is as heavy. Conjure with them. Brutus will start a spirit as soon as Caesar. Now in the names of all the gods at once, upon what meat does this our Caesar feed, that he is grown so great? Age, thou art shamed. Rome, thou hast lost the breed of noble bloods. When went there by an age, since the great flood, but it was famed with more than one man? When could they say, till now, that talked of Rome, that her wide walls encompassed but one man? Now is it Rome indeed, and room enough, when there is in it but one only man. Oh, you and I have heard our fathers say, there was a Brutus once that would have brooked the eternal devil to keep his state in Rome as easily as a king. That you do love me, I am nothing jealous. What you would work me to, I have some aim. How I have thought of this, and of these times, I shall recount hereafter. For this present I would not, so with love I might entreat you, be any further moved. What you have said I will consider. What you have to say I will with patience hear. and find time both meet to hear and answer such high things. Till then, my noble friend, chew upon this. Brutus had rather be a villager than to repute himself a son of Rome under these hard conditions as this time is like to lay upon us. I am glad that my weak words have struck but thus much show of fire from Brutus. Let's go ahead then and unpack these words of Cassius, and in particular take a look at the ways in which he's trying to persuade Brutus to join the conspiracy. Because remember, that's what we're focused on for now. Another thing to remember is that the stories that we hear Cassius tell of Caesar are all with the purpose to belittle him. So we need to, again, come at his words with a huge grain of salt, meaning can we believe that these experiences actually took place, or is he in some way changing them, altering them, fabricating them in order to make his stories more outlandish, to get Brutus to agree that Caesar is in no way fit to rule Rome, certainly by himself. And the way he initially begins his discussion is to hone in on that quality that Brutus ended with in our last video, that quality of honor that not only characterizes who Brutus is throughout the play, but also something that drives him to make his decisions. And it's going to be very important that this is the point from which Cassius begins, right? He says, just as you are someone who live by honor, that people know you to have this outward favor about you, that you are well liked and respected, honor is also the center of my story. So very quickly, when we talk about honor, we can mean it in several ways. One of the ways we can take this is to be viewed as highly respected, right? You honor your parents, or you should, right? They should be held in high respect by you because of their authority over you, their love for you, their role in taking care of you. But we also think about honor in terms of doing what is morally right. So we should live with honor, meaning when we know what the wrong thing is, we choose not to do it. We do the right thing instead. And this is where Cassius begins. And he initially says, not only am I talking about honor, but he says this line, I had as life not be as live to be in awe of such a thing as I myself. And here he's simply saying, I would rather not live than have to live looking at someone who is just like me and made to be in awe of them, right? Think about it. Would you want to be led by or placed under the control of someone who is exactly like you, right? It's something that you look at that and say, I'm just like they are. Why shouldn't I be in control? And this is Cassius's point where he's going to be coming from. And he engages Brutus in this too. I was born free as Caesar, so were you. Meaning, not only is Caesar like us, we are also free men like him. Because remember, they're part of this upper class society. Hence what he means when he says born free. They're not born as plebeians or born as slaves. And this is where he's going to begin telling his story. So he's established his central argument, that we and Caesar are no different. So why should Caesar be in control? And the first thing he brings up is this idea that when they are going across the river Tiber, they get into a troubling spot where Caesar is going to be in a place where he needs rescuing. But initially, Cassius explains that it was Caesar himself who basically made this bet. Let's see who has the gall, the daring, to swim across the Tiber during this angry flood. And this is important for a few reasons. So we've already discussed these first 2 points, that he bases his argument in honor, that he's using logic, logos, to get through to Brutus. But here, this personification of the Tiber River, right? Not only is this a beautiful literary device, here we see the Tiber as a character who is just as much alive as Cassius and Caesar, in this case alive with a storm. But we also see one of the negative qualities that Cassius is trying to highlight in Caesar, that he is reckless, right? It's not a smart thing to swim across a river during a flood. But then we see that Cassius is not going to be sort of viewed as someone who's not up to the challenge. So he is going to give in. And one of the things that we need to remember here, right, he is constantly going to paint Caesar as weak, while in comparison, Cassius then will be painted or viewed, right, as strong. And so he says this, that upon the word, accoutred as I was, meaning even though I wasn't dressed for such an occasion, I plunged in and bade him follow. So bade meaning I bid him or I asked him to come with me. So although Caesar is the one who starts this reckless bet, this reckless swim across the Tiber, it is Cassius who shows courage and plunges in first, with Caesar following him. And initially, things are going well, right? He says that even though they were buffeted about by the river, that was lusty sinews, meaning that these strong muscles that they had, these hearts of controversy or spirits of competition, they were doing really well. But ere before they could arrive at the point proposed, meaning before, right? This word ere meaning before, Caesar cries, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink." And here Cassius goes into a very interesting comparison, a simile in this case, right? Because the use of the word as, but also an allusion. And he's alluding to this mythological character, Aeneas, who is going to be viewed as this founder of Rome, right? That's what he means when he says our great ancestor. And so Cassius is saying, just as Aeneas bore his father, meaning Anchises, on his back through the flames of Troy, so did I bear Caesar. And just so we understand the allusion being made, Aeneas is a mythological figure who is written about by the Roman poet Virgil. And in this instance, they're talking about the defeat of Troy. So if you've ever seen the movie Troy or you've heard of Helen of Troy, this is what is being discussed here. This great war that takes place between the Greeks and between Troy for the love of Helen of Troy. And that out of the midst of all of this destruction, all this battle, as Troy has finally fallen, Aeneas is the brave conquering hero who rescues his old and weak father from the burning flames. And it's interesting that Cassius makes this comparison, because by comparing himself to Aeneas, not only is he saying, I am the strong one of the pair, Caesar is this weak old Anchises, but I, Cassius, liken myself to the very founder of Rome. That's a huge gauntlet to throw down, right, in making that comparison. And it also shows a great point of pride that Cassius has in himself. But remember, we're never losing sight of the poet who is writing these verses, right, that being Shakespeare. So in this simile that Cassius uses, we also get to see the way that Shakespeare views him, the tone or attitude he has towards Cassius. And that is that Cassius is full of hubris, this negative pride. And then he goes down further, right? So if this is the scenario, if I, Cassius, have rescued Caesar from the very rivers of Tiber, why then am I meant to be like a wretched creature? Wretched meaning someone who is looked down upon, that he has to bend his body, meaning he has to bow down to Caesar. And this initial speech brings up several key points, right? That Cassius makes himself look good at the cost of Caesar. That we see this allusion to Aeneas, to the founder of Rome, and that Cassius does this to liken himself to the hero of Rome, again, placing himself in a higher position than Caesar. Because remember, his entire argument is one, if Caesar is to rule, we are just like Caesar. He's certainly no better than us. And even more so, we are actually better than him. But Cassius doesn't stop there. He keeps going. And remember, Cassius is going to make use of these anecdotes, or these short stories that center around pathos, or pulling at someone's emotion, but also logos, meaning logic, to get Brutus to see Caesar's weaknesses. Because if Brutus can recognize the weaknesses that live in Caesar, then it's going to be that much easier for him to agree to the conspiracy to kill him. And Cassius continues by telling this story about when Caesar was in Spain and Cassius was with him. Caesar falls ill and says the fit was on him. I mean, he became very sick and he had a fever. And he paints him physically as very human. And he does so in words that are very degrading. So his coward lips did from their color fly, meaning that his face went pale. But this use of the word coward, again, personification here, right? Because this is a character, a quality of being human. And that this is to show that quality that exists in Caesar. He is not brave like I am. He's weak. He's a coward. And this is important for Cassius to point out, because in the very next lines he says, well, if he is such a coward, right, then why do the Romans mark him, meaning to pay attention to him, and write his speeches in their books, meaning to remember his speeches? Someone like that is not worthy of the love of the Roman people, is the argument that Cassius is making. And he continues to paint Caesar in this really awful light, right? Comparing him to, for the Romans back then, someone who would be seen as weak, this sick young girl. And this is Cassius's point. A person who is this cowardly, who is this weak, who is this prone to disease and sickness, he should not bear the palm alone. And the palm here being a reference to a sign of victory. So it shouldn't be for Caesar to get to bear the weight of victory all on his own. He needs to share it. So again, key notes here. Cassius continues to show the human qualities of Caesar to break away or chip away at this godlike image that he has gained among the people. And he uses logic to do this, right? If he is just like us, and in some cases even worse, why should he be praised instead of us? Continuing then, we see finally that Brutus enters into the discussion. But interestingly, he doesn't address anything Cassius has said, but rather he addresses the fact that he again hears this shouting and applause being made. And his initial concern is that Caesar has had some new honors or some new titles, gifts given to him or bestowed upon him. And we need to remember that Brutus is not giving in easily to what Cassius is saying because he loves Caesar, but he very clearly fears Caesar gaining complete control over Rome. And this is what Cassius will play to. He needs to not play to getting Brutus to hate Caesar, because that's not going to happen. But he needs to play on Brutus's love for Rome, which Brutus has already stated trumps his love of Caesar. And he's going to do a good job in doing this, right? So again, this general shout and applause. And Cassius uses this to make another simile. He says, this Caesar walks around like a colossus. A colossus here meaning a giant, right? But alluding to also this huge statue of the Greek god Apollo at Rhodes, right? So when we think of the word colossus, we think of a giant. But remember, whenever we see a word that's capitalized, it's a proper noun. It's going to indicate to us that Cassius here is referencing something more specific. And so here, not only has Cassius been chipping away at this image of Caesar as a god, he says that Caesar likens himself to Apollo himself, while we, you and I, Brutus, have to walk around, he says, finding dishonorable graves for ourselves, right? So he gets to be this god, while you and I are made to be something that's weak. And now he gives Brutus a piece of advice. And interestingly, he doesn't blame fate, right? This idea that there's nothing I can do to control what's going to happen to me. What will be, will be. He says the exact opposite. He says that the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, meaning it's not in our fate, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. And he says that essentially, Brutus, it is your fault. It is my fault that we are inferior to him, because we can do something to fix it. And then he goes into these long lines of rhetorical questions, again trying to persuade Brutus, right? What's in a name? What's in Caesar? Your name sounds just as good, right? Meaning your name bears part of who you are. For example, when I say the name of a great celebrity or very famous figure, you immediately think of the qualities of that person. So here Cassius is saying the qualities that exist within you, Brutus, are just as good as those that exist within Caesar. So again, we see that Cassius is chipping slowly away at Brutus's defenses, and he's going to now take a turn and go into this dialogue into Brutus, you have just as much chance to rule as Caesar, so why don't you? So again, we need to recall that Cassius wants Brutus to see himself as potential competition for Caesar, because this will be one easy way, right, for Brutus to reason, well, I love Rome, and in order to protect Rome, I need to take Caesar out. And so Cassius is going to continue on with this long discussion, right, about what's in a name, right? What's in Caesar that it should be better than Brutus? Here he says to weigh them, meaning to look at those qualities that exist. They are both as heavy, meaning you both have good merits. And he says conjure with them, right? Conjuring meaning to think about magic. Both of them, he says, would start as spirits, meaning that they would both work in this sense of bringing about magic, about the supernatural. And then he switches tone a little bit, and he starts to explain to Brutus why Caesar is able to gain so much control. And he blames the time period or the age that they are in. And this is important because he's going to link back to the former glory of Rome, when Rome existed and ruled not just with one man, but with several. Remember, we talked about this idea of layered system in government, so that you have this idea of checks and balances, so that no one grows more powerful than they should be. And so, again, driving this rhetorical question, why is it now that we are encompassed in this city that's now ruled by one man? And here, Cassius does something incredibly brilliant. He's going to play to Brutus's pathos through his ancestry. So when Cassius says here that there was once a Brutus, he's not talking about the Brutus in front of him, but the ancestor of Brutus, who drove out the last of the ancient kings of Rome. So, Brutus, your ancestors did the very same thing that I am pleading you to do now. Right? Again, convincing him to agree with him. Now finally we see that Brutus is going to respond to everything Cassius has said. And we're going to see that Cassius's words are successful in convincing Brutus to at least consider the idea. Right? Remember, Brutus loves Caesar, so he's not going to turn on a dime. It's going to take him some time. But he starts by saying that he's not jealous or suspicious of Cassius, although he does understand what Cassius wants. He wants Brutus to join this conspiracy. And Brutus then promises that he is going to consider what Cassius has to say, and that they're going to meet at a later date. So again, as we come closer to the Ides of March, the 15th of March, we're going to see the conspiracy heat up and Brutus's involvement in it increase. And now we get to see more emotion from Brutus, because up until now, he's been rather distant, hiding behind honor. But he says this, that he would rather be a villager, meaning a peasant, a plebeian, than to be a high-standing figure of Rome under the rule of Caesar. And this is going to hint not just to Cassius, but also to us, the audience, that Brutus is in fact going to agree to join the conspiracy. And Cassius, just as sly as ever, thanks Brutus, right? And he is left in awe, right? This fake awe. We know that his weak words have struck fire or passion from Brutus. So again, we're ending this portion of scene 2 by understanding that Brutus now has this huge decision before him, but there are several hints that in the scenes to come, Brutus is going to agree to enter into this conspiracy. That's it for video number 22. In video number 23, we are going to finish Act 1, Scene 2. We're going to see the plot thicken incredibly, and we're also going to see Caesar's return. And although he's going to show hints of understanding the danger around him, he's going to remain, on the whole, blind to what is to come. So please do make sure as we are continuing Scene 2 that you are taking notes, because you're going to need them when I post the last video for Scene 2 for that worksheet. And then finally, just for today's video, I'm going to post a question on Google Classroom, like I have been doing, that I would like you to answer. And the question is this: what techniques does Cassius use to persuade Brutus of Caesar's inability to rule? Okay? So please answer this by April 30th. Midnight. Please do so also in complete sentences, with 5 sentences being the minimum. Okay, a complete sentence, right, is not a bullet point, but also you need to make sure that you're using evidence from the text, right? So you can't say that he uses a rhetorical question without backing up what you're saying, right? You wouldn't take someone's word at something. You need to show evidence to support it, okay? And that's what I'm asking you to do, okay? I've been lenient in terms of taking off grades for that, but if I continue to see a large majority of students not meeting the sentence requirement or not using evidence, I will be taking off points for that, okay? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next video.